We have our latest round of players to avoid, plus a bunch of news to talk about up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aaron Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosuzuka.
and Fado, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hit some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on March 7th. My dad's birthday. Happy birthday. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show.
My grandfather's birthday. What do you know?
Look at that.
Look at that.
My sister's birthday is in 2 days. That's not really.
My nephew's
fun.
birthday is tomorrow.
Actually, my sister's birthday is tomorrow, I guess.
Big time for birthdays.
Wow. Look at
This
look
is
at
amazing.
My brother's girlfriend's birthday is this weekend too. We got a lot going on.
June was a big month.
But yeah, it certainly was. Bust 2.0, such a sad topic for a Kokomo Friday, unfortunately. We have more news. The lie detector determined everything Grayson Rodriguez said yesterday was a lie. We'll wrap up with a look at Bust 1.0. Are we still avoiding these players? All right, Scott. From one grandma's living room yesterday to another today. Who's in addition to Bust 2.0?
Oh, okay. I'm not in a grandmother's living room for real. I will point out this. I'm back in my own living room. For those who can't see, got the power restored. Back to normal here. Okay. Pete Crow-Armstrong is a new bust of mine, as I promised he would be. I think there's a lot more downside here than upside. I know he got hot at the end of last season. And so people were excited. You know, he's got a lot of speed, obviously, a little bit of a power threat. You look at his minor league numbers, and those are also a reason for excitement. But here's the thing. He has a negative. His skills are not promising when you add them all up. He doesn't hit the ball very hard. He has some of the worst plate discipline in baseball. It's kind of the same situation as, say, Don Rafaela, except we're not guarding against it as much for Pete Crow-Armstrong. So I cannot find my numbers here. I clicked on your bust column. Okay, I got him right here. Pete Crow-Armstrong. So here's the deal. He did in August hit 314 with 4 homers, 6 steals, and a 933 OPS, and got that strikeout rate way down to 14.3%. But then in September, he struck out 30 times while walking just 4. So that's not
Gave it all back.
Yeah. Number 2 against him. Here's the actual numbers to back up what I was saying. His average exit velocity is 46th percentile, lower half of the league. His hard hit rate, 30th percentile. His zone contact rate is in the bottom 7% for batters with at least 400 plate appearances. And his chase rate is in the top 3%, which is to say he's among the most fooled hitters on both strikes and balls.
But at least he hits the ball hard, right?
No, he doesn't. I already gave those exit velocity readings. He does not. So look, he's very athletic. He's very fast. I think for as much as he's able to get on base, he's going to steal bases. Plays great defense. Plays like his hair is on fire. Plenty fun to watch. Probably a fan favorite.
Or that his hair is blue, which it is.
I prefer the natural red because then it looks like his hair is on fire too. Oh, I guess fire can be blue, but that's oof. That is playing with your hair in very, very hot level of fire. Okay. I'm worried Crow-Armstrong is basically going to be like a Harrison Bader type.
Yeah.
That's it. I'll stop talking now.
I think if you just look at the underlying skills that both showed last year, Victor Robles just looks like a much better player. than P. Crow-Armstrong. Now, I know Victor Robles has a fairly long track record of being not good, and I understand the skepticism there, and P. Crow-Armstrong is a young player who we hope will take a step forward, but just based on what they did last year, Robles looks a lot closer to having it figured out as a hitter. So this is one of those ones where, at some point I'm going to do my name brand versus generics article where I basically just look at a player who's expensive and find a player who looks exactly the same as them, but at a much cheaper price. And Victor Robles is kind of the generic version of P. Crow-Armstrong, where I expect a lot of stolen bases. That's kind of the only thing I expect. But I do think like the base of hitting skills that he showed last year is stronger than Crow-Armstrong. So P. Crow-Armstrong also being added to my bust lists. I'm with you on that. He had, over the course of August, a 353 expected WOBA, which is a very good mark, especially for a player as athletic as him, because you would expect him to perhaps outperform his expected WOBA. In September, it was 278. That's about as bad as you can be as a major leaguer and not get sent down. So I think his playing time is pretty secure because he's arguably the best defensive center fielder in baseball. I think he'll steal some bases, but there's a chance P. Crow-Armstrong, and maybe a pretty good chance, that P. Crow-Armstrong is just a one category contributor and is actively detrimental in the other categories.
And then there's the other thing. He's going ahead of Josh Lowe. He's going ahead of Lane Thomas, who I know you don't like, Chris, but it's a similar...
Has been what you want P. Crow-Armstrong to be.
Exactly. And he's going ahead, way ahead of Cedric Mullins.
75 picks ahead.
I think there's a good chance all three of them are better than Pete Crow-Armstrong this year. Josh Lowe, perhaps considerably so.
In 32 NFBC drafts so far in March, Pete Crow-Armstrong's ADP is 137.8 as the 34th outfielder off the board. Josh Lowe is going 14 picks later. Lane Thomas is going 40 picks later. Victor Robles is going 50 picks later. Cedric Mullins is going 75 picks later. So, yes, I agree. I wrote him up in Bust 1.0. Happy to have you guys on board.
Now, all that being said, it should be noted that P. Crow-Armstrong does have real little big league pedigree. I don't know if you guys have heard this fact, but it blew my mind. That was the mom in Little Big League.
Right. His real life mom is the mom.
His real
in
life
Big
mom
League.
was the kid's mom who falls for the guy who played Danny Kincannon.
And I got to say,
great movie.
He kind of resembles the love interest on Little Big League.
That's true.
I don't know what his actual dad looks like, but
probably looks like him, I would guess.
Chris, over to you for a player not named Pete Crow-Armstrong, who is an addition to Bust 2.0.
I've been circling this one for a while, and I'm fully ready to put my stamp on it, and that's Shohei Ohtani, parentheses, pitcher, close parentheses, because in leagues where he is eligible to be drafted as a pitcher, he's been going off the board around SP 40, about 125th overall. I'm sorry, that's probably just going to be a wasted pick, and it looks especially true after Thursday when we learned that Shohei Ohtani has not been throwing off a mound for about the last, 8 days? And there is no timetable for him to return to throwing off a mound.
We learned he's not going to throw off a mound again before the series in Tokyo. So they're shutting him down for the next 2 weeks. And they originally were aiming for May, and now they're saying TBD.
And it might be that he doesn't start throwing again off of a mound until May, in which case he'll have to build all the way back up. And you're probably looking at July at the earliest, which, hey, if they get 80 innings out of him and he's ready to pitch in the playoffs, that works out for the Dodgers. But this has always been the problem with the Dodgers, and it's only grown more of a problem this year that they don't need these guys for the regular season. They've got 10 potential starting options over the course of the regular season that they'll be able to cycle through. They want their best pitchers available in October. And in Ohtani's case, not only all of that we already said, but they've already said he's not going to go on a minor league rehab assignment when he is ready to pitch. They're planning on having him through rehab or simulated games, live batting practice, and that's how he's going to get up to speed to return to the mound, which means that the first pitch that Shohei Ohtani throws in a real game in July or June or whenever it is that he makes his debut will be his very first pitch thrown since September of 2023 in a game. I just don't think you can expect anything from him. I know betting against Shohei Ohtani has gone really wrong in the past, but I think on the pitching side specifically, you should just expect nothing from Shohei Ohtani. If you want him, and then there's this. He may not have IL eligibility when he's not pitching.
You're saying
unclear.
The pitcher version in leagues
The
where
pitcher
there's a
version of
separate
him.
version.
Yeah. Yahoo did put the pitcher version of Ohtani on IL designation last year.
Anything
I don't
goes.
know if they're going to do the same thing this year.
Yeah.
They shouldn't. He's not on the IL, but that's not
He's
up
not.
to me.
He's not two people, to be fair.
Right, and
either.
he's not on the IL. But he's not on the IL. Like putting someone on the IL when they're not on the IL.
Well, making somebody two players when they're just one.
Right, but like, you know,
I'm just giving you a hard time.
But if that's the case in your league, then you just have to waste a roster spot on him too. So
yeah,
even if it's an IL stash, I don't really think there's much value here. But especially there, if you can't use him in an IL spot, I think he's almost undraftable.
A commenter says pitcher Shohei is already on the IL on Yahoo. I can't confirm that, but that is
I did see that. I don't know if that's just a carryover until they update or what, but yes, that is true.
I'm going to open up a bigger conversation now, if you don't mind. I think it's of interest.
We do have a lot of players to get to, but all right.
I have wondered for a while now, and this causes me to wonder something about Ohtani. The cited reason why they're not having him throw again before the Tokyo series is because they want to make sure he's ready as a hitter, ready to go as a hitter. He proved to be an awfully valuable hitter last year, had one of the all-time great seasons, first ever 50-50, first ever DH, full-time DH to win MVP. Had two Tommy John surgery, two surgeries on the UCL and the pitching elbow. He's on the Dodgers with tons of rotation options. Could we be nearing a point where they just decide it's not worth trying to have him pitch? He's so valuable as a hitter. Let's just get that from him.
Well, I think the fact that he has been able to play at a high level, even when he's been injured as a pitcher, I think does make it worthwhile. Like he should be able to continue hitting at a high level, even if he does break as a pitcher. So I think it's worth just seeing. And if he breaks down, and that's a bummer.
Well,
but
it might not be the ligament next time. It might be something that makes it impossible for him.
Sure, it could be the shoulder. That would be but I think it's still worth trying, especially if he wants to.
You do.
I think it's a really fair question, and it was one that I was thinking about as well. I wasn't going to bring it up because I wanted to keep things moving, but it's a very fair question, and I do think maybe we're one more injury away, and hopefully that doesn't happen. And hopefully if it does, it's not a major one. But I think we're one more injury away from the Dodgers maybe pulling the plug on that as a pitcher. I don't know that. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, and I don't know either. I just it's you have to wonder because
I think it's a fair question.
They've already decided that for the month of March, his attempts to pitch are interfering with his hitting.
All right. Well, let's take our first break. Before we do that, reminder to subscribe to the FBT newsletter if you haven't already. If you're watching on YouTube, scan that QR code or just head to cbssports.com/newsletters. Plus, big thanks to everyone for watching us live here on YouTube. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. 30K by opening day. Let's do it. And we will take a break. Be back right after this.
One of golf's elite courses, Quail Hollow, hosts the game's top players at the PGA Championship this May on CBS.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Busts 2.0, players that we are avoiding at their current average draft position. And I will give you guys a name. I want to preface this by saying that I hate fun. And I realize this is incredibly dangerous, what I'm about to do. But Ronald Acuña is a player that I am avoiding this season. I just do not like to take risks early on in drafts, and I think Acuña is still a big one this season, especially as a late second, early third round pick coming back from another torn ACL. He has now torn the ACL in both of his knees, and we know that he's already missing the first month of the season at least. It sounds like he could be back in early May, assuming there are no setbacks. But the last time he returned from a torn ACL, he was not the same player. The last time we saw Ronald Acuña in 2024, he was not the same player as his MVP form. So I just have questions about, will he be that same player? How long will it take him to return to form? He's going to have to shake off some rust. I presume that will have to happen. Will he run as much? I'm not so sure. Maybe that'll happen in the second half. I think there are a lot of questions, and I realize that Acuña, when he's on, he is one of the best players, maybe the best player in baseball. But I just don't like to mess around in the early rounds. And it kind of feels like that's what you're doing by using a second or third round pick on Ronald Acuña. So I'm sorry, Scott, that I had to do that.
Oh, no, it's fine. I get it. I think it's all fair. I think it's worth it to me if he makes it to around pick 30, maybe slightly earlier than that in a shallow league where you have more recourse if it doesn't work out. And obviously for the time he's not even available to you, you have better alternatives. Shallower league, I'm more willing to take the shot. But even in deeper leagues, if he falls to pick 30, I kind of like it there, but he rarely does. Somebody seems more eager to take him than I am, usually.
The ADP for Ronald Acuña on Fantasy Pros, 26.8 as the 12th outfielder off the board. He has been falling a little bit lower in NFBC ADP in March. I think he's down to like 33, 34. So that's becoming a little bit more palatable if he falls to like the fourth round or something like that. But I do feel like there's still someone in every draft that's willing to take that risk on Ronald Acuña. Scott, back to you. Let's keep things moving here. Another addition to Busts 2.0.
Okay, let's do. Trying to think of something that's actually novel for this podcast. Let's do Jhoan Duran. I have Jhoan Duran as a possible bust for this year. I guess I talked about it on the relief pitcher preview pod. I've never quite gotten the hype for Jhoan Duran. I think even his really good season closing in 2023, he was being drafted like as the fifth closer the following year. And I was like, what? Somebody explain that to me. And nobody ever did. So anyway, last year ended up being kind of a disappointment. Got only 23 saves, had a 3.64 ERA, a 1.16 whip. Averaged only 100.5 miles per hour on his fastball. And you say, well, that's still ridiculously fast, but it was a drop of 101.8 from the year before. So more than 1 mile per hour. It made him more hittable. It dropped his swinging strike rate from 16.2% to 14.5%. It made it so he wasn't even the most dominant reliever in the Twins bullpen. Griffin Jax with a 2.03 ERA, 0.87 whip, and 12 K per nine. Also an 18.4% swinging strike rate. Those were Griffin Jax's numbers last year. All of them are better than anything Duran has ever put up. Doesn't mean Jax is going to come right in and do that again. Obviously, relief pitchers can be pretty volatile from year to year. But it does mean the Twins have a very exciting alternative if Duran is continuing what he was doing last year. Plus, he has a manager in Rocco Baldelli who's not especially committed to having a full-time closer anyway. That's a big reason why Jax managed to vulture 10 saves last year. So you had Duran with 23, you had Jax with 10. It's not outside the realm of possibility that it flips this year. And Jax is the one getting the majority of the saves for the Twins. So at cost, I don't think there's any chance I'm drafting Duran. I like several relievers going after him more than I like him.
I will say 4 of Jax's 10 saves came while Duran was on the IL.
4 of them, but 6 didn't.
23-6 from that point on. Which
That's a bad ratio.
it's not a great ratio, but Duran's not being drafted
Less-
as a 5 closer anymore. And Duran did get actually more than all of the strikeout rate back in the second half of the season. His strikeout rate was lower early on, especially in the month of May. He had 12 strikeouts on 55 batters in May, but from the All-Star break on, he had a 34.5% strikeout rate, which was actually slightly higher than his career best over a full season. It did come with a 4.56 ERA, but if you look at it, he had 3 bad outings out of 25, and that's what led to the ERA. He had 3 outings where he gave up 3 earned runs. That accounted for 9 of the 12 earned runs he gave up over the final 3 months of the season. So I thought about putting Jhoan Duran on my list. He is also, his velocity's down so far in spring training, about 2 miles per hour from last spring.
I feel like you could say that about every reliever so far, though.
Yeah,
pretty much.
But it's fair to wonder.
I'm looking for him to regain velocity that he already lost last year.
And so, I think it's fair to wonder, can he be that same guy without that outlier velocity? I think that's fair, but I guess my thing is, if I'm going to call a reliever a bust, I think there has to be some chance that they're just not any good. And I just don't think there's a chance with Duran. I think he's going to be great. And so if maybe it becomes more of a 60-40 split and he gets 23 saves or 25 saves over the course of the full season, that might happen. That's reasonable. But I don't think he's going to lose his job.
Okay, you don't think he's going to lose his job. Odds are against it, but I think it's more likely than his ADP is giving credit for. And I don't know that to call a reliever a bust, he just has to be bad. I think he has to lose the main thing giving him his value, which is the majority of the save chances for the Twins.
The only issue I have with him is just the way Rocco Baldelli has used Jhoan Duran. I mean, that if he just used him as the closer, I mean, I think he has top 5 closer upside. If you look at the skills from last year, it was still a 285 FIP, 270 xFIP, 250 SIERA, 276 xERA, and his quality of contact against actually got a lot better from 2023 to 2024. So the fact that his BABIP and his hits per 9 went up last year seems kind of confusing for me. I just feel like maybe he was a little bit unlucky, at least based on those ERA estimators. So I think he's still awesome. The biggest question is this Rocco Baldelli for me. So, and I think that's enough of a reason to not draft him as a top 5 closer. Sure. Right now, he's the 10th reliever off the board around like 100, between 100 and 110 in 80.
So I'll move on to my reliever bust pick, who is a guy that I think does have actual risk of just not being good. And that's Robert Suarez for the Padres, who doesn't have the elite strikeout rate and never has. He's always been just a contact suppression and a control guy. And last year, the control was better than it had ever been. The contact suppression was better than it had ever been. And he ended up having a really, really good season. But it was also a season where things started to come apart as the season went on. His walk rate blew up towards the end. His strikeout rate was even lower. And I just think when you look at Robert Suarez and the way he pitches, it's an awesome fastball that he throws between the 4-seamer and sinker. He throws 87% of the time. And then he mixes in a changeup about 12% of the time. That just feels like there is almost no margin for error. And Robert Suarez is another one of those relievers, Frank, as you mentioned, whose velocity is down a couple of miles per hour early on in spring. I don't necessarily think it will be when we get to, March 27th, but when you're talking about a guy who's already got a slim margin for error, has only been that elite reliever for 1 year. Remember, he had a 4.23 ERA in 2023 and missed a bunch of time too. This is the kind of profile that I'm trying to avoid when it comes to my relief pitchers. So like, I get the concerns about Duran, and like I said, I considered him as a bust candidate, but Robert Suarez is going a few picks later, and that feels so much riskier than Jhoan Duran.
Robert Suarez's ADP on Fantasy Pros is 120th as the 11th reliever off the board. So yeah, I mean, based on ADP, one pick behind Jhoan Duran.
Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Who is likelier, which is one variable, who is likelier to get 30 saves this year?
Probably Suarez. I think he's also more likely to lose his job.
Yeah, I think Suarez is likely to get 30 or likelier to get 30 saves. I think he is also way likelier to get 10 or fewer saves.
I just look at that bullpen, and there's other really, really good options there too. So if he struggles at all, they've got Jason Adam, they've got Jeremiah Estrada. I think they have that luxury of making a switch, which you could say the same thing about Minnesota. They have Griffin.
Right. I mean,
I just think Duran's a much better pitcher.
Of the two bullpens, Griffin Jax strikes me as the best reliever.
Jason Adam is really good.
You mean besides the closers?
No,
I think Duran's the best pitcher in that in either of those bullpens.
I think so too.
Okay, can you explain it to me, because I haven't gotten it?
All the ERA estimators are 285.
He gives up a lot of base runners. He had just under 11K per nine, but that's not like Josh Hader level. That's not like Edwin Diaz level. At the
risk of being a little too glib and flip, 2024 wasn't the first season of these players' respective careers.
No, like that. But even he had Griffin a 114 whip in 2023.
Right, but Griffin Jax had a 24.8% strikeout rate and a 3.86 ERA in 2023. Last year is far and away the outlier for Griffin Jax. And if that's who he is moving forward, that's awesome, but he's 29 years old. Jhoan Duran is 23, I think, or 24. Jhoan Duran has a multi-year track record of being an elite shutdown reliever.
And Robert Suarez was bad in 2023.
Yeah.
He had an ERA over 4 with 7.8 K per nine. So.
Now, it's a small sample size, but like these are all small sample sizes. The sample size last year for Jackson and Robert Suarez is 2 months of a starting pitcher. So for me, it's just, I don't know. Jax, what he did last year was about as good as the best we've seen from Jhoan Duran.
It was better than we've ever seen from Duran in every measurement.
Sure, fine. If that's true, it's a really small gap. Like we're talking about, like Jhoan Duran has never had an xERA below 3. Last year was the first time he had an ERA above 2.5. It was the first time he's had a strikeout rate below 32.9%. It was the best year of Griffin Jack's career and the worst year of Jhoan Duran's career. And Jhoan Duran was still really good.
Yeah, we do have to move on. It's a good conversation, but I do think we've kind of covered all bases in both bullpens there. For me, I'm going to go back to another player that could get me in trouble here. Again, I don't like fun. I get it. Oneil Cruz. So last year, his ADP was 61.8. He went out and had an okay season. He went 2020. He finished 78th overall in Roto, just 2.7 fantasy points per game. His ADP is now 46.8. It's gone up 15 picks from where it was last year. I understand every year's player pool is different. So, comparing ADP is not the easiest thing to do year over year, but the fact that he's just gone up after having an okay season. I understand he still possesses massive upside, but he also still has big flaws in his game. A 30% strikeout rate, really bad zone contact and swinging strike rate, still bad against lefties. It was a 686 OPS last year, 40% strikeout rate in his career against lefties, Oneil Cruz, and he still hits too many ground balls, a 48% ground ball rate. It's just hard for him to maximize that raw power, which is immense. He hits the ball as hard as anybody in baseball. It's just the ground ball rate is too high. So I don't think Oneil Cruz is going to sink your team by any means. I think he'll be fine. He just kind of feels overvalued as a top 50 pick. And a lot of drafts that I see, he goes even higher than this. Like, people get crazy about Oneil Cruz. I see him sometimes going like the 3rd or 4th round of 12-team leagues, and it just feels too early for me. So
I think he has gone in the 1st round. in a draft. It's only one, so let's not freak out about it. But I think that has happened in one of the TGFBI leagues I saw.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Scott, back to you. Who you got?
Well, hopefully this one doesn't bother people as much, but Brandon Pfaadt.
Come on, Scott.
Brandon Pfaadt, who I know our guest, I can't think of who it was in the mock draft, Waterloo.
Michael Waterloo, yep.
Yeah, he likes Pfaadt, but
I
do not like Pfaadt. I dislike Pfaadt, and here's why.
Do you like him on a yacht?
I think the argument for Pfaadt goes something like this. He had a 4.71 ERA last year, which is obviously bad, but a 3.78 xERA, a 3.61 FIP. How much better is that than his xERA? A lot. It's still also not that great. It's okay. So he's a less than strikeout per inning guy who has a high 3s ERA instead of a high 4s ERA. If everything goes right, he doesn't. His swinging strike rate last year was 11.4, so very mid. You look at his arsenal. The sweeper is kind of good, I guess, but there's not a lot there to really point to say yes, this is how Pfaadt is going to take off by making increased use of this pitch or whatever. It's just there's not much there. He gets hit hard. Average exit velocity put him in only the 32nd percentile, so he's not a huge bat misser. He doesn't have some wipeout pitch. He gives up hard contact. I just don't see a lot of room for him for improvement here. Maybe Brandon Pfaadt does live up to the ERA estimators this year and does have that high 3s ERA. Okay. He's Jose Barrios. Best case scenario, he's Jose Barrios. And worst case scenario, he's what he was last year, which is far from being Jose Barrios. So yeah, Brandon Pfaadt.
I think the defining stat of Brandon Pfaadt's career is this. Over the final 2 months of last season, he had 70 strikeouts in 55 1/3 innings, which is a bonkers number. And he had a 6.56 ERA. He just I don't know if he can do both at the same time. We've seen stretches of lots of strikeouts, but he tends to get hit hard when he gets the strikeouts. I don't know what it is. His fastball is pretty bad. His curveball has gotten crushed. It's not that there's nothing there. I don't know. I felt like he was really overrated as a prospect in fantasy circles, especially. And I just don't think the stuff is that good. I think he's fine. I think he's probably an average, maybe slightly better than average pitcher, but I don't see a huge reason to draft him ahead of Mitch Keller.
At some point, it's not just bad luck. It's something that Brandon Pfaadt is doing. And like you said, Chris, when he pitches in the zone, he does tend to get clobbered and gives up a lot of hard contact and home runs. The one thing that I will point out, and when talking to Jeff Zimmerman last week, we did a bonus podcast together. I asked him if you could use just one pitching metric to judge starting pitchers, what would you use? What is correlated most with success? He said K- walk rate. And Brandon Pfaadt last year was tied for 16th among qualified starting pitchers with an 18.8% K- walk rate. That was better than Bryce Miller, Corbin Burns, and Framber Valdez. Again, at some point, it's not bad luck. He's doing something wrong. But from a K- walk rate perspective, Brandon Pfaadt is a good pitcher.
But the Ks aren't really there, is the thing. He's pretty good control.
So he is, it's a 24.8% strikeout rate, which is about 10% better than average. Average is usually around 22 to 22.5%. So yeah, there's not nothing there, but yeah, it's a strikeout per inning ish. And it's not a special strikeout rate either way.
So just to reiterate, my biggest objection with Pfaadt is that even if things go right, again, even if he lives up to those expected ERA stats, he's Jose Barrios, and Jose Barrios goes 60 picks later. So what are we doing?
All right. Well, fair enough. Let's take our final break. When we return, we'll rattle off the rest of our Bust 2.0. We've got some news to talk about. We'll do that right after this.
Baby, we are gonna start a fire.
From world-renowned clubs
Simply devastating.
to worldwide stars,
Wrexham have done it. This incredible ride continues.
the English Football League on CBS Sports Network, and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today we are talking Busts 2.0. And Chris, I'll just rattle off the rest of the names on your list. You have Rafael Devers, Lane Thomas, and that's it. Those are the only other two we haven't talked about. So I know you've talked about Devers the past couple days, but anything else you'd like to add on him or Lane Thomas?
No, for me with Devers, it just mostly comes down to the fact that I assumed this shoulder injury was in the past, and clearly it's not. I mean, look, maybe it is, and this is all just behind the scenes wrangling to figure out what his future position is and all that. I'm not sure that would actually make me feel all that much better, but it just comes down to we saw what happened when that shoulder became a real issue for him down the stretch last season, and he was pretty terrible. So I have to downgrade him in my league, in my drafts, at the very least from where I was before, and I do think there is considerable potential for things to just go really wrong here if that shoulder gets worse. And then Lane Thomas, I just don't think he's that good. And like, I know it's fantasy, and that how good you are doesn't really matter, but he started 43 of 56 games after being traded to Cleveland. He might just be a short side platoon bat. I know they don't have a ton of center field options if he gets off to a slow start, but they sat him about 20% of the time last year. He has a 680 career OPS against right-handed pitching, 200 points lower than his mark against lefties. And he only attempted 6 steals after getting traded to the Guardians. So I don't know if he's the safe source of speed that we've been assuming he is. And if he's not, I really don't know if there's much else to fall back on.
All right, Scott, over to you. Additions to Bust 2.0, you have Roki Sasaki, Logan O'Hoppe, Alexis Diaz, and those are the three. A quick thought on any of them?
I think we've litigated Roki Sasaki pretty thoroughly here. He did look really good in his first spring start. It kind of relieved some of my concerns about his fastball velocity, but it still comes down to, I don't think he's going to get anywhere close to a full-time workload with the Dodgers.
Chris's cat, also a fan of Roki Sasaki, as we heard.
Yeah.
She's acting a fool tonight.
Logan O'Hoppe, this actually presents a buying opportunity in 2 catcher leagues, because I am detecting that nobody thinks Travis d'Arnaud is going to do anything with the Angels, because clearly that job belongs to Logan O'Hoppe. Well, Logan O'Hoppe was pretty bad last year. He was worse than Travis d'Arnaud offensively.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw the last couple of years with the Braves, Sean Murphy couldn't shake Travis d'Arnaud. Who's the Angels manager? Oh, the guy who spent all those years with Travis d'Arnaud in Atlanta, Ron Washington. Logan O'Hoppe, again, had a lower OPS than d'Arnaud last year, and after the All-Star break, O'Hoppe hit 196 with a 578 OPS. Look, I think he'll be at the top of the depth chart, but I think it'll be more like a 60-40 split than the 75-25 split he had last year, and that would be enough to probably take him out of 1 catcher league consideration. And finally, Alexis Diaz is my nominee for first closer to lose his job, because I think he's already bad, frankly. His entire time in the closer role is built on the first half of 2023, when he had a 2.03 ERA, 103 WHIP, 13.7 K per 9. Looked amazing. Looked like a world-beating closer. Looked like his brother, frankly. But since then, in a season and a half, he has a 4.20 ERA, 139 WHIP, and 8.6 K per 9. Clearly not closer caliber numbers, and that's the much larger sample for Alexis Diaz. So anybody who is drafting him, counting on, because he feels like a safe closer, because you can't identify that fallback option in the Cincinnati bullpen, I don't think Terry Francona is going to stand for that.
Fly ball pitcher with bad control in Cincinnati. It's
walks,
hard.
Yeah, bad control, 5 walks per 9.
Yeah.
Mhm. And they do have an option in one of the Taylor Rogers. Taylor Rogers
is there. Yeah.
who does have closer experience. He's a lefty, so it's not ideal, and he's not amazing, but he has closer experience. So I guess they could go to him if Alexis Diaz struggles early in the season. Couple names for me. Josh Naylor, his ADP right now is 74 over on Fantasy Pros. It just feels like you're buying at the peak on a player who's struggled to stay healthy. Now I realize he's probably going to bat cleanup for a team that just led baseball and runs scored. So again, there is risk here again of him just making me look foolish with this choice. But I don't really like the park shift for him. And again, it's just he has struggled to stay healthy in the past. That's Josh Naylor. Luis Castillo, his ADP is 89.8 as the SP25. The decline has started. I just have a bad feeling about it. The swinging strike rate has dropped tremendously from 2023 to 2024. Fastball velocity from 97 miles per hour back in 2022 down to 95.6 last year. He got crushed by lefties. His changeup is not as effective as it once was. So his ERA estimators have been closer to 4 the past couple of years. I just wonder if, that the other shoe drops and we maybe see, an ERA closer to 4 this season from Luis Castillo. Again, I don't think he's going to sink you, but he's a fade for me.
That's one where if I wrote this a little later, I probably would have had Luis Castillo in it because it's the velocity decline has been furthered this spring, and maybe it's part of the spring buildup. But given that he was already dealing with that last season, I'm not touching him unless he falls.
Let's hit some news and notes. And sure seems like we got duped by Grayson Rodriguez yesterday. Turns out he is dealing with right tricep soreness and will undergo testing. That would certainly explain why his velocity was down. Not whatever fugazi explanation he gave us, but how much do you guys plan to lower Grayson Rodriguez in your rankings?
I haven't yet. I'm discouraged. Don't get me wrong. I was encouraged yesterday. I'm discouraged today. I'm when you have the velocity drop and then some kind of feeling in the arm, that just seems like a recipe for disaster. It is currently being described as soreness, and I have soreness in all parts of my body, but don't actually have an injury.
You're also not a major league pitcher, Scott.
Right. But you get what I'm saying. Like until there's not a real diagnosis yet. So I'm going to wait to lower him on my rankings until there is.
I am removing him from Breakouts 2.0.
Same.
I am moving him outside of the top 150 for now. I'd be happy to move him back if it turns out that this is just a couple of day thing, but my enthusiasm on Grayson Rodriguez was mostly projecting on him getting better, taking a next step, putting it all together, all those things. And now he's not healthy. I don't know if I can even project last year's production given that, let alone the step forward. And he was already, even though I was higher on him than the consensus, he was being drafted ahead of what he did last year. Last year it was good strikeout rate, short of elite, a high 3s ERA. I think he's a good pitcher. I think he can be better than that, but I'm going to move him to around 150 and put him in a holding pattern until then. So it's behind Seth Lugo. It's behind, are there any other pitchers in this range? Not many. In the same range as where I have Kevin Gausman. And if I were picking right now, I think I would take Gausman ahead of Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah.
I was surprised how little he was discounted in the head-to-head points auction we just did.
Yeah.
I was thinking someone was going to get him for real cheap, and he went pretty close to my projected value for not having moved him down. Maybe it's just a bad decision on that person's part, but it is worth putting out there, I think. Yeah,
I threw him out there in that one as my nomination, and I may have bid at like $7, but I was out once it got past that.
All right, we did get some Yankees updates. Luis Gil will be sidelined for at least 3 months with a high-grade lat strain. He's shut down from throwing for at least 6 weeks. Is he worth drafting and stashing at all?
If you have 4 or more IL spots, sure. I think anything less than that, I'm not even sure he's worth a bench spot.
Would you rather stash him or Shane Bieber at this point?
I guess Heel. He's probably going to come back before that, but I had performance concerns about Heel to begin with, and now his spring training has been blown up. So the way I put it in what I wrote for tomorrow's newsletter is he might be worth stashing if you only have 2 IL spots for a few weeks. But then once you get to April, I looked at last year's IL stash rankings piece that Scott wrote on April 9th. There were 13 can't drop players and 16 more who were, quote, really difficult to drop, and 34 total you'd want to have stashed. That's by April 9th. By the end of April, it was 42 players you'd want to have stashed. Given that Heel is not going to throw for 6, 7, 8 weeks from now, and then he's going to have to do the whole build-up process again, and we're not sure how he's going to look, I don't think he's going to be one of the top 40 players to stash by the end of April.
All right, Chris, I'm sorry about this next one. Giancarlo Stanton is going for a second round of PRP injections in both elbows. He doesn't really have a timeline, but the Yankees still think that he will return at some point this season. Do not draft him. DJ LeMahieu's MRI showed a left calf strain. He's shut down from baseball activities for a few weeks. Sounds like Oswald and Oswaldo could split time at third base for the Yankees early on. Not confusing at all.
Good.
Christian Walker underwent an ultrasound on his left oblique, but is waiting for the inflammation to subside before having additional imaging done. Chris, that sounds kind of bad, especially for a player who has had oblique strains to both sides of his oblique.
And he did
both obliques. That probably
both obliques. Yeah. He did say that it does not feel as bad as the oblique injury last year that cost him most of the final 2 months of the season. Grayson Rodriguez also said he wasn't hurt yesterday. I think as a general rule, being less optimistic than the players themselves are about injuries isn't a bad idea. To become a Major League Baseball player, you kind of have to have a baseline level of self-confidence that would seem ridiculous to almost any other human being alive. You've overcome pretty great odds just to get there, so you feel like you can overcome anything. I think I'll wait until the doctors have their say, but I was thinking about adding Yainer Diaz to Bus 2.0 based on the concerns about playing time I brought up a couple days ago. Well, now if Christian Walker's going to miss the start of the season, as seems possible, Yainer Diaz might get a little more playing time at first base than we expect. So we'll wait and see. I haven't moved him down yet, but I also haven't really drafted Christian Walker yet this year. So I think I have him lower in the consensus anyway.
Brendan Nimmo had an MRI on his injured knee, which showed inflammation. He's now dealing with both that and plantar fasciitis in his foot. Junior Caminero left Thursday's game with lower back tightness. Manager Kevin Cash said Caminero is day-to-day. Shout out to Lawrence Butler, who got a 7-year, $66.5 million contract extension. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the green and yellow behind me. That is an homage to Lawrence Butler, who got paid. I don't really,
both green.
I don't really. Yeah, there you go. I don't really know how to analyze extensions like this. It's like buying out team control years and things like that. I don't know. Is this a good extension?
I mean, you think about it this way. On the free agent market, a win tends to go for about $8 to $10 million in wins above replacement. So a 2.5 to 3 win player is generally about an $18 million to $20 million player. He's probably not making even $18 million at any point in this deal. And if he is, it's only at the very end. So they're basically paying him to be a low-end starting outfielder. There is very little risk on this deal for the A's, even if you don't believe Lawrence Butler is a difference maker. This is probably going to be a fine contract for him.
All right, Twins pitcher Zebby Matthews left Thursday's start with an apparent ankle injury. He slipped while fielding a grounder, and he was having a great spring before this. So much for my Emiliano Teodo optimism yesterday. Bruce Bochy said Teodo is a long shot to make the team's opening day roster.
Bruce Bochy listens to the podcast and he had to respond.
Yeah, come on.
He also said they still want to develop him as a starter.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
This isn't really news, but a few observations from spring so far. All three of the Pirates catchers, Joey Bart, Endy Rodriguez, and Henry Davis, have been crushing it this spring. I do wonder if maybe Endy Rodriguez could get some games in at first base while Spencer Horwitz is out with injury. Henry Davis, I don't know. I don't really know what the Pirates can do with these catchers, to be honest.
He crushed it last spring, didn't he?
Yep, had a great spring.
We got duped by that, or at least I did.
Crushed it in the minors.
Oh, I very much did.
Yeah. So we'll see some names to watch there. And I wanted to mention a potential deep league post-hype sleeper who's also having a huge spring. Curtis Mead with the Rays. He went 4 for 4 on Thursday. He is now 14 for 18 with 1 home run this spring. I just don't know where he can play.
He also, I think, added like 20 pounds of muscle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which, like, everybody adds 20 pounds of muscle in the offseason, but
except for us.
Well, I added 20. I added 20 pounds.
Some Statcast from Thursday. There was a lot, so I'm just gonna read off all these, and then you guys can quickly react. But Brian Wu, 2 1/3 shutout innings with 6 strikeouts. He had 10 swinging strikes on 37 pitches.
He's awesome.
6 of those came on the fastball. Michael Soroka, 4 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts to 0 walks. His velocity remained up. He had 11 swinging strikes on 61 pitches. Small sample, but he's looked really good.
Is he awesome?
I mean,
maybe he should have just been doing this all along.
I don't know. This is weird. It's weird, but
yeah,
I don't know.
It's so different. The slider.
The slider is
weird. Way more horizontal than it used to be.
It's also like this spring. It's been. I think he's added 4 inches of horizontal and 4 inches of vertical break on the slider. So there are times when it looks like a curveball. There are times when it looks like a sweeper, which I don't think is a bad thing if you can command multiple looks of a breaking ball. He also threw, I think, 6 or 7 changeups in this one after going mostly 4-seamer and slider in the first start. Even the sinker, he was just pounding righties inside and got 3 whiffs with it. Like, he looks good. I don't know how sustainable it is, but I think he's
seen
more
it outside of spring training. He made those Arsenal changes in the second half last year, working in relief for the White Sox, but it was 2 and 3 inning outings a lot of the time. He's definitely going to be in my deep sleepers article.
I think at the very least he's moved out of just, hey, he's a sparp, and into I think there is legitimate sleeper appeal here, even in non-head-to-head points leagues.
He made it to the reserve rounds of NL Labor, and I had the last pick in the reserve rounds. Yeah, I knew he wasn't going to make it to me. I'm just so upset that I didn't have a chance. Well, I guess I could have just drafted him in the auction if I wanted to, but that is so frustrating. Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Shane McClanahan, 2 2/3 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts. Velocity was down a touch, but he looked really good. 11 swinging strikes on 40 pitches, 3 on each of his fastball, changeup, and slider. Aaron Nola had 3 shutout innings with 6 strikeouts. Velocity was down 2 miles per hour on all of his pitches, so something to watch. Joe Ryan's spring debut, 2 shutout with 4 strikeouts. Velocity was down 1 to 1.5 miles per hour on all of his pitches. Garrett Cole got rocked. We'll talk about that more on tomorrow's Mailbag podcast, so make sure to listen in. Dustin May, 3.
Although with incomplete information, I hadn't seen the actual line at the time since we recorded that earlier in the day.
You can react if you'd like to, Scott.
Just ignore what I say on the mailbag. It's a little concerning.
Dustin May, 3 shutout with 3 strikeouts. His sinker was down 1.7. His fastball was down 2.3 miles per hour. Jack Leiter, 3 shutout with 3 strikeouts. He has looked really, really good. Velocity remains up big time. He had 11 swinging strikes on 33 pitches. He's added a sinker, a kick changeup. Everyone's added a kick changeup.
I love the branding.
Yes, it's great. And Josh Hader's velocity was way down. All relievers have been down, but his sinker was down 2.7. His slider was down 4 miles per hour.
I feel like this is actually pretty normal for him. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember that this being a topic of conversation with Josh Hader in springs past. So I'm not too worried about it.
Anyone else you want to touch on here? Hader, Leiter, Dustin May, Garrett Cole, Joe Ryan, Aaron Nola, Brian Wu.
I have a couple of other notes that I can just throw out here.
Sure.
One, Sandy Alcantara has a new slider grip. He's trying to get a little more break on the pitch, and he's been toying with that this spring. It's getting about 2 inches more, both horizontal and vertical breaks so far. Bo Bichette will hit either first or fourth in the Jays lineup. We'd prefer first, but 100 RBI potential if he hits fourth wouldn't be a bad thing either. Junior Caminero left with lower back tightness. Did you mention that?
Who was that?
Junior Caminero?
Yeah, I mentioned it. Yep.
Okay. And Dylan Cease is actually throwing a real changeup this spring, which is he'll get they'll do GIFs and stuff when he threw his old slider, which was basically an ephus, and it was like a nonsense pitch that he clearly telegraphed when he was going to throw, and it didn't work at all and was not a real pitch. This is actually a real pitch. I don't know if it's going to be good, but it is a real pitch that he's trying to throw this spring. It's in the low 80s in velocity. We'll see.
Dylan Cease also has grown out his beard, and he kind of looks like a madman. I'm down for it. I don't know if you guys have seen that, so it's interesting.
I have not seen Dylan.
Someone else.
Actually, no, I did see Dylan Cease's beard. He needs to get like a comb, you know?
Yeah,
It looks kind of wild.
You guys saying that? Wow, it must
Well,
really be out there.
I keep it groomed.
Yeah, mine is pretty short. I mean,
he looks like he's just
I know, but you guys are pro beard.
It's a little.
You guys are pro beard, and I am anti beard. So those are the sides we've chosen.
All right, let's wrap things up. A look back at Busts 1.0. Again, these articles came out back in January. So are we still holding strong on players to avoid? Scott, your list included Chris Sale, Jacob deGrom, Willie Adames, Brenton Doyle, Mark Vientos, Spencer Steer, Bryce Terang, Luis Heel, Ryan Pepio, Cedon Rafaela, Kerry Carpenter, and Taj Bradley. Obviously, a few injuries in there with Steer and Luis Heel, so I'd imagine their ADPs are going to drop a lot in Luis Heel's case. But are you still avoiding all of those players at cost?
Yes. Yes, for the most part, at cost. Chris Sale is probably the one I draft the most, just because sometimes he's the last of the clear aces there and slides, because he is kind of everybody gets the risk with Sale. And so I've drafted him on more than one occasion. Starting pitchers are risky. When he's healthy, he's going to be dominant. But the bust potential is obvious and worth stating. Jacob deGrom is, to me, the clearest bust candidate, because he hasn't thrown even 100 innings in a season since 2019. And, there are other injury-prone players that I'm more sanguine about, but in deGrom's case specifically, what changed after 2019 is he started throwing a couple miles per hour harder, and it's been nonstop elbow, shoulder, forearm stuff since then. I just think his actual physique can't hold up to the velocity he's trying to get out of it. The correlation there is so clear, and we've seen it every year. So he's going just outside the top 50. He'd probably have to fall to round 10 for me to take Jacob deGrom. So Willie Adames, he kind of overachieved. He kind of had a career best season across the board, even though the underlying data didn't change. And now he's going from Milwaukee to San Francisco. So I would have called him a bust even if he stayed in Milwaukee, but San Francisco makes it a fairly easy call. Mark Vientos has a lot of buzz because he had a big postseason, and he had a big regular season too. But what put him in the Mets lineup was a 22% strikeout rate early on. It seemed like he really whipped that. It became 33% from June 30th on, and a high BABIP kind of helped keep him afloat during that time. I think there's a chance he looks like a Patrick Wisdom, or the worst case of an Eugenio Suarez this year. I think that's the downside risk for Vientos, and they have third base alternatives if that happens. Bryce Terang was terrible in the second half, hit only 218, and the way he was hitting in the first half seemed kind of unsustainable anyway. And then I'm going to combine the two Rays pitchers here, Ryan Pepio and Taj Bradley, because it's kind of the same issue for both. They're fly ball pitchers, they're home run prone pitchers, and now they're going to be in what I imagine is going to be one of the worst places for home run prone right-handed pitchers. Swamp Brenner Field, George Epstein Brenner Field in Tampa, the Yankees, one of the Yankees minor league facilities, same dimensions as the big park in New York, which means the short porch in right field, but with the humid Florida air that those humidified baseballs are just going to cut through. It's going to make that short porch play even shorter, and it's going to be bad news for Pepio and Taj Bradley.
Scott, have you trademarked Swamp Brenner Field, or did someone else call it that and you saw it somewhere?
I think I came up with it.
Okay. Yeah, I was genuinely asking because it's pretty good.
It's sort of like John Means Business, where I genuinely think I came up with that, and then it just became something everybody used, and I never got credit for it. I don't know. Maybe RotoWare will make a shirt up for Swamp Burner Fields, and at least someone will be able to capitalize on it that way.
Kenny, if you're listening, you know what to do. Chris, over to you. Bust 1.0, Lawrence Butler, Logan O'Hoppe, Pete Alonso, Luis Garcia Jr., Willie Adames, Mark Vientos, Pete Crow-Armstrong, Josh Lowe, Jacob deGrom, Blake Snell, Roki Sasaki, and Felix Bautista. Are you still avoiding these players at cost?
I haven't specifically moved off of anyone on this list as a bust, but Josh Lowe, his price is fine, probably. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it, even if I'm not as optimistic as you guys are. I think you both had him on sleepers. Butler, man, in March so far, it's a small sample size, but in March drafts on NFBC, he is officially inside of the top 60.
32 drafts is actually a pretty decent.
It's not nothing. And this seemed like he was always headed there. And it's not that I dislike the player. I just don't like the price. Top 60 for a guy with 3 months of high level production. We just did this last year. It didn't work out with Nolan Jones. I'm not saying it's going to be that bad for Lawrence Butler, but it's not enough of a slam dunk to justify the price. I
can't take him ahead of Ozuna and Schwarber, which is where I see him go sometimes.
Yeah.
I think he is the next outfielder off the board by the time they're going off the board, but it's just not the same level of predictability there.
I've got serious FOMO, man. I agree with you.
Get it,
Chris. Like, I wrote him up as a breakout in 1.0, but it is a big price tag, man. So.
Yeah, no, it's not that I dislike the player. I can see the value there, but it's 3 months and really 2 months. As I've talked about, his September was pretty unspectacular. So
unspectacular, but
not unplayable.
Not
but
bad.
It was like
not like the Lawrence Butler we were seeing.
No,
before.
But it was like a 700 OPS. He didn't hit for any power. The strikeout rate was back up.
Not all the way, but yeah.
If I'm taking anyone off the list, it's probably Pete Alonso, but his price is getting higher. It's an all fields approach for a power hitter who has very good, but not elite exit velocities. So I'm uncertain if I want to take him out. I'll be writing this on Sunday night, and we'll see how I feel about Pete Alonso when we get there. And then what I really hope is that by Sunday, Felix Bautista throws in front of Statcast cameras so I can get a sense of where he's at, because that was, I actually didn't include Shane McClanahan in my busts. I thought I did, and then I went back and read it, and it turns out I didn't. And watching him today, I thought he looked basically like himself, which was not at all a guarantee coming back from the second Tommy John surgery. So, Bautista, they get 3 strikeouts in his first spring appearance.
I think it was 2, but
2?
He did look good.
But there was no Statcast. And what I saw was that he maxed out around 96. I want to get some hard data on that one, because if Felix Bautista is maxing out around 96, I think he's probably still being drafted too high. it can still go up from there, obviously. But that's I want to get some hard data on Felix Bautista. I will probably be leaving everyone else in this group, including DeGrom, Snell, and Sasaki.
All right, my busts 1.0, Jazz Chisholm, Chris Sale, Jacob deGrom, Brian Wu, Willie Adames, Jake Berger, Pete Crow-Armstrong, Robert Suarez, Hunter Green, and Pete Fairbanks. Jazz, another one I realize big upside, can make me look foolish, but he has had a very extensive injury history, and sometimes I see him go in the second round of drafts. So it's too early for me. I don't like to take risks early on. So unfortunately, I love the player, but I don't want to pay that price tag to get him. Brian Wu, making me feel a little bit more nervous about this. I don't doubt the talent. It's just, can he stay on the field? So he's dealt with a lot of arm injuries the past couple of years. He's already had Tommy John surgery once in his career. And I will highlight Hunter Green, who, again, it's an electric arm. I know I'm kind of sound like a broken record here. No fun. But Hunter Green is someone who has dealt with a lot of injuries himself. Last year, it was an elbow. 2 years ago, it was a shoulder. He walks a lot of batters. Previous years, he's given up a lot of hard contact. He's a fly ball pitcher in Cincinnati still. So we'll see if the hard contact suppression that he had last year carries over from year to year. If he does, then he could have a really strong season once again. It's just, I do think it comes with incredible injury risk. So he's a fade for me there on Hunter Green. We all good, guys? Good to wrap it up.
I think so.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is just Berger's price keeps going back up. He's almost the top 100 pick. And I get that it's a better lineup, but his skill set may not be well suited for run production, even in a good lineup. And so he might be just like an 85 RBI, 75 run guy, which is not nothing, but it's not special from a first baseman. He might only really be a positive in home runs, and in points leagues might be even worse because his plate discipline is truly terrible.
Yeah, he's not a points league guy.
Yeah,
if he's hitting the home runs in a good spot in the lineup, why would he not be getting RBI?
Because he basically doesn't do anything but hit home runs. There's very few singles, doubles, and triples in there, and so he doesn't really. He's just not like Vinny Pasquantino and
home runs,
right? But they're relatively rare occurrences. Like the only time he's really going to drive runs in is when he does it with a home run.
But he's still hitting for 250, 260 batting average.
Right. He had 134 hits last year in 137 games. It's not a skill set. Like Josh Naylor and Vinny Pasquantino have outproduced their other stats in RBI, right? Because they make a ton of contact. They put the ball in play. They make to be an old baseball
Isn't the lack
head.
of hits just an at-bats issue, though? Because he's going to walk less. He's going to get more at-bats than those guys.
He doesn't put the ball. He doesn't put the ball in play, I guess, would be the better way to put it. So there's there's very few productive outs to put on an old baseball head term.
Okay.
So that's why Josh Naylor has always been an RBI standout, even when his production hasn't been as good as it was last year, because he doesn't strike out. He puts the ball in play. He's going to get RBI even when he's not hitting doubles and home runs. Jake Berger really is only going to drive in a lot of runs when he's hitting for power.
All right. We are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.